This is a story about a technology so radical, so dangerous, and so secret that it was designed to kill not only the enemy, but also its own operators. In the deepest, darkest corners of the Kriegsmarine's experimental divisions, fear was the greatest tool. We are not searching for a battleship or a U-boat sunk in battle, but for a place that was meticulously erased from every chart, every log, and every memory. Base Goblin. This was the deep water facility where Hitler's regime attempted to perfect a new, silent generation of underwater warfare, a unit of human torpedoes and submersible craft that were supposed to turn the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic in 1943. But the base vanished, taking with it the entire unit and the radical, devastating weaponry they were testing. For 80 years, the fate of the Goblin crew was a rumor, a ghost story among veteran divers. Now, off the coast of Brittany, resting inside a heavily corroded control compartment of a prototype midget submarine, illuminated by our single cold light, we have found the chilling proof. The skeletal remains of German Frogman, still slumped next to the weapon that silenced him, an artifact of self-destruction. This silent sentinel holds the key to the base's catastrophic demise, a final, horrifying picture of a project that went too far. The historical paradox of Base Goblin begins not with its disappearance, but with its sudden, desperate construction. By 1943, the German U-boat fleet was beginning to suffer unsustainable losses to improved Allied radar and air patrols. Admiral Donitz desperately needed a technological leap, something small, fast, and completely undetectable. This led to the rapid development of radical one- and two-man midget submarines like the B-Bear and Sea Hund, and the highly experimental Neger human torpedoes. But even these small craft required a forward operating base that could be hidden from Allied surveillance. That base was Goblin, constructed secretly in a vast, natural underwater cave network off the French coast, equipped with pressurized wet docks and testing ranges for the new submersible warfare division, Cave Urban. The secrecy was absolute. Personnel were recruited directly from naval engineering schools and sealed off from the outside world. The unit, officially designated Speerbrecher Commando 77, was testing a radical new propulsion system, a closed-circuit engine that promised zero exhaust bubbles, making them true ghosts of the deep. But this innovation came with an extreme, lethal risk to the crews. If you want to dive deeper with us to expose these forgotten sacrifices and the most dangerous technical secrets of World War II, hit that subscribe button right now, smash the like button, and watch this video to the end, because you will not believe the true reason why the Goblin crew was ordered to test a weapon designed to kill them. The first hint that Goblin was not a typical military installation came from fragmented post-war Allied intelligence reports detailing unexplained biological wastage among the Cave Urban units operating near the French coast in late 1944. These reports spoke of crews dying not from Allied fire, but from internal systemic failure, often discovered slumped inside their midget subs or diving gear. Our breakthrough came from the archives of the French resistance. A fisherman codenamed Soleil, Sun, reported seeing immense, heavily reinforced construction barges operating near a notorious submerged cliff known locally as Le Gouffre du Diable, the Devil's Abyss, in 1943. This abyss, previously considered too deep and treacherous for any naval base, was exactly where our advanced sonar located the enormous, man-made anomaly. The Goblin base was not a simple bunker. It was a complex of deep-water pens blasted directly into the rock face, designed to withstand any conventional aerial bombardment. The key was the sheer depth and the unique pressure-sealed access tunnels. When we finally sent our ROV down into the Devil's Abyss, the initial visual confirmation was chilling. The entrance pen was completely blocked by a massive, rusted gate, but jutting out from the debris, resting on the silted seabed, was the fragmented hull of a small, experimental submarine, much smaller and more heavily armored than any production B-Bear. This wreck, clearly marked with the experimental designation UX-10, was the Sentinel of Base Goblin. The UX-10 was utterly unique. It wasn't designed for a human crew to sit inside. It was designed for a single, prone operator to control while semi-submerged, essentially a highly sophisticated, motorized diving sled with a torpedo attached underneath. The exterior of the UX-10 was covered in massive, ceramic-lined pressure tanks, unlike anything seen on other German midget submarines. These tanks, we hypothesize, were part of the experimental closed-circuit propulsion system, designed to use highly volatile, concentrated hydrogen peroxide, a dangerous oxidizer known as T-Stoff, which provided silent, bubble-free propulsion. This T-Stoff, while effective, carried an enormous risk of accidental explosion and, more dangerously, produced highly toxic fumes if the internal circuit failed. It was literally a technology that carried its own self-destruction mechanism. We focused our ROV on a partially opened, damaged hatch on the UX-10 side. Peering inside, the camera gave us the terrifying image now preserved in our files. The skeletal remains of the Frogman, still in his heavy, rubberized suit and helmet, slumped against the control panel. He was not killed by shrapnel. He was killed by the air he breathed. The interior of the UX-10 was a tableau of technical failure and sudden, quiet death. The soldier was slumped directly next to the control levers for the sea serpent apparatus, the weapon the base was testing. The sea was a small, high-explosive depth charge designed to be dropped from the UX-10. But the weapon's design was radical. It contained a proximity fuse that could only be deactivated by the operator using a specific acoustic pulse from the cockpit. The intent was to prevent capture. If the sub was captured, the operator would release the weapon, ensuring the destruction of both the enemy and the UX-10. This was the true self-destruction weapon. However, the cause of the Frogman's death was clearly a failure of the T-Stoff system. The chemical breach likely filled the cockpit with a plume of toxic gas, killing the operator instantly, silently, with the sea still armed and active just meters away. The most crucial find, however, was in the skeletal hand of the operator, a small, personalized dog tag, identifying him as Oberleutnant Kuno Riegel. Riegel was the lead engineer on the closed-circuit propulsion system. He wasn't just a pilot. He was the scientist testing his own flawed creation. His body remained here, a victim of the very secrecy he helped enforce, with a live, activated sea depth charge right beside him, ready to explode at the slightest movement. The discovery of Oberleutnant Kuno Riegel, the lead engineer of the UX-10's self-destruct propulsion system, slumped next to the still-armed sea serpent depth charge, confirmed the catastrophic end of Speerbrecher Commando 77. The unit was not destroyed by the Allies. It was annihilated by its own advanced, unstable technology, a victim of the lethal T-Stoff gas. But Riegel's death was only the beginning of the mystery. The UX-10, the experimental midget sub, lay just outside the colossal main entrance of Base Goblin, suggesting that the failure happened moments before or during an attempt to either enter or exit the pressurized dock. The main entrance itself, a massive hinged steel door, was jammed by a secondary explosion, likely the final desperate act of the base personnel to seal the toxic secret within. We had to find a way inside the Devil's Abyss to uncover the purpose of the Goblin base and the ultimate fate of the rest of the unit. Using a specialized microblasting technique designed for delicate wreckage penetration, we managed to clear a small passage through the debris field near the jammed main gate. Our ROV then slipped through, revealing the astonishing scale of Base Goblin. This was not a simple refueling station. It was an underground, man-made fortress. The main chamber was a gigantic, cathedral-like cavern blasted out of the granite, designed to house multiple cave-urban units and their entire engineering support staff. The air inside was still, the water strangely clear, preserved by the lack of external current. Lined along the cavern walls were multiple dock pens, each sealed by its own pressure door. Most pens were empty, but one, designated P-14, was different. Its door was visibly warped and buckled outwards, suggesting a massive internal pressure event, far greater than a simple T-Stoff accident. This was the scene of the final, devastating event that led to the base's complete abandonment. Pin P-14 became our new focus. The door was twisted beyond recognition, requiring hydraulic tools to gain entry. Inside, the sheer violence of the explosion was evident. The internal machinery was ripped from the walls, and the entire compartment was covered in a thick, metallic dust. This wasn't T-Stoff gas. This was the result of a chemical weapon or a high-explosive failure. But the pen was empty, save for a massive, heavily charred gantry crane and, crucially, a small, heavily shielded storage unit built directly into the floor. The unit was circular, steel-plated, and locked. The metal bore strange, unique scorch marks that did not match conventional explosives. These scorch marks were consistent with a thermite reaction or an extremely volatile hypergolic fuel failure. The discovery suggested that the base was testing not just silent propulsion, but a radical new type of high-energy explosive charge that was supposed to be deployed by the Sea-Schlange weapon. This charge, codenamed Project Chimera, was intended to replace standard high explosives, providing a localized, superheated blast to vaporize enemy ships. The explosion in P-14 was likely a catastrophic failure during the charge's final preparation. Inside the P-14 storage unit, which we managed to breach using plasma cutters, we found not the expected Chimera charge, but the personal logbook of the base Goblin commander, Captain Lieutenant Franz Worth. The book was sealed in a small, titanium box, a clear indication that it was meant to survive any disaster. Worth's final entries confirmed the truth. The unit was under extreme pressure to perfect the Sea-Schlange/Chimera combination, which was plagued by catastrophic instability. The failure in P-14 was indeed a Chimera charge test that went rogue, killing the entire maintenance crew instantly. But the log also contained an even darker secret, confirming the existence of a separate, third layer of command, Abteilung X, Section X. Worth noted that immediately after the P-14 explosion, an order arrived from Abteilung X, in order to scuttle the entire base, seal the main gate, and leave no survivors to prevent the highly sensitive Chimera failure data from falling into Allied hands. The order was signed by a name Worth simply referred to as the Architect. This wasn't an accident. It was a ruthless, deliberate cleanup operation executed by the highest echelons of Nazi secrecy. The final, devastating detail in Commander Worth's log described the fate of the remaining crew. Worth detailed that the surviving engineers and frogmen were not allowed to evacuate. They were forcibly sealed inside the deep barrack section of the base by the small contingent of Abteilung X guards who had arrived just before the scuttling order. The ultimate act of erasure was the deliberate flooding of the deeper personnel sections. The log concluded with Worth stating he was placing his own final testament, the logbook, into the titanium box before using the last available emergency exit to escape and place the final charges near the main gate. This confirmed the purpose of the slumped skeletal figure of Regal found outside the base. Regal's death by gas was either a fortunate accident of war, or he was one of the few who tried to escape the impending scuttling, only to die of the toxic fumes. The real horror lies deeper within, where the majority of the Speerbrecher Commando 77 still remain, sealed within their underwater tomb. We now had a map to the deep barracks, the final resting place of the forgotten unit, and the potential location of the fully assembled, yet failed, Project Chimera charge. The discovery of Commander Worth's logbook and the confirmation of Project Chimera, the hypergolic explosive charge, revealed a horrifying truth. The Goblin base was not evacuated. It was executed. The catastrophic failure in Pin P-14 triggered an immediate, ruthless cleanup operation by Abteilung X, leading to the forced scuttling and the deliberate drowning of the remaining crews in the deep barracks section. Our mission now was to enter the barracks, the final, sealed tomb of Speerbrecher Commando 77, and confirm Worth's testimony. But more importantly, we needed to find out why the Sea-Schlange/Chimera system failed, and whether a complete, live charge of the unstable explosive still lay within the base. The challenge was immense. The barracks were located in the deepest, most unstable rock section of the cavern, sealed by a massive, collapsing rockfall triggered by Worth's final charges. We used high-frequency sonar to map the barracks section behind the rockfall. The readings confirmed the space was intact, but utterly blocked. The sonar detected multiple large metal objects within the chamber, shapes consistent with beds, equipment lockers, and, chillingly, several small metallic objects with a distinctive elongated profile of the sea schlange weapon. The sheer quantity suggested this was the main armory. To penetrate the rockfall, we couldn't use explosives. The vibration could easily destabilize the live chimera charges we suspected were inside. We employed precision hydro-drilling, slowly boring a narrow tunnel through the debris, a process that took several agonizing days. The tunnel was just large enough to deploy the smallest of our ROVs, the Peeper, a drone built to transmit images from forgotten, claustrophobic spaces. As the Peeper broke through the final layer of debris, its lights revealed a scene of petrified silence. The deep barracks were a long, cylindrical chamber, completely flooded but perfectly preserved. The water was stagnant, cold, and clear. Along the walls were bunks, lockers, and tables, all covered in a thick layer of fine silt, a picture of domestic life violently interrupted. Our first, most immediate discovery was the presence of the unit itself. The skeletal remains of at least 30 men were visible, preserved by the oxygen-depleted water, lying in their bunks or slumped over tables. They did not die in a struggle. They died quickly and silently as the water rushed in. Their uniforms were largely disintegrated, but the heavy leather belts and equipment remained, frozen in their final positions. It was an instant, silent mass drowning, confirming the ruthless execution order carried out by Abteeling X. However, the most compelling artifacts were found at the far end of the chamber, near the mess area, where the engineers likely gathered during their off-duty hours. Here, pinned under a collapsed table, was a metallic chest bearing the crest of the Naval Engineering Academy. The engineering chest contained a wealth of documents, miraculously preserved inside wax-sealed tubes. These were not operational logs, but the personal notes and calculations of the Chimera development team. The calculations were frantic, filled with corrections and warnings about thermal runaway and chemical volatility. They confirmed that the Project Chimera charge used a volatile mix of metal powders and a hypergolic oxidizer, designed to create a localized, superheated thermobaric effect. The notes detailed the exact cause of the P-14 failure, a tiny, almost undetectable fluctuation in the ambient temperature of the pen caused a premature reaction, leading to a catastrophic runaway explosion. The notes also contained a final, desperate warning. Charge D-7 must never exceed 10 degrees Celsius ambient temperature, or total structural failure is imminent. This was the self-destruction mechanism of the weapon itself, a tiny vulnerability that the German High Command refused to acknowledge in their desperation for a miracle weapon. This knowledge was exactly what Abteeling X sought to erase. Now knowing the lethal instability of the Chimera charge, we located the armory. It was a smaller, fortified room off the main barracks, its door intact. Sonar confirmed the presence of multiple sea schlange charges inside, arranged on racks. The temperature inside the Goblin base, even in the stagnant water, was stable and cold, but the threat was still present. We needed to confirm if the charges were live. Our ROV, guided by the recovered calculations, focused on the temperature control mechanism on the charges. The most crucial find, however, was not the instability of the charge, but a handwritten note taped to the armory door, likely left by one of the trapped engineers before the scuttling. The note, scribbled in broken German and English, contained a clear code, almost a plea. The main charge D7 is not here. It was taken by the commander's last boat. Find the last boat, find the real secret. This final revelation changes everything. The engineers knew the final, most dangerous charge was still missing. Commander Worth, who logged his escape through an emergency exit, did not just take his logbook. He took the most volatile, active, and powerful Chimera D7 charge, meaning the most dangerous secret of Base Goblin is not resting within the abyss, but is still afloat, or sunk, somewhere outside, a time bomb waiting for discovery. The final, desperate note left by the trapped engineers confirmed our deepest fear. The most dangerous part of Project Chimera, the highly volatile D7 charge, was not lost inside the sealed Base Goblin, but was removed by Commander Worth in his final escape, making it a live, floating time bomb somewhere in the vast North Atlantic. This charge, susceptible to detonation above /BM 10-/circ/tex, represented an immediate threat to modern shipping and marine life. We had to find the commander's last boat and neutralize the D7 charge before the shifting currents brought it into warmer waters. Worth's final log entry mentioned using the last available emergency exit and a small, fast vessel for his escape. Our team immediately focused on the last piece of experimental technology we had yet to identify, the Versix Kleinstubboot experimental midget submarine, known only by its designation, M55. M55 was a completely off-the-books prototype, a high-speed, battery-powered submersible designed for courier missions, small enough to be launched from a standard fishing trawler. Our sonar survey of the deep-sea canyon directly outside the Goblin entrance revealed a small, distinct metallic signature far down the rock face, beyond the main debris field of the scuttle base. The object was tiny, barely larger than a car, its profile matching the known drawings of the M55. The sub had apparently failed during Worth's escape attempt, unable to make the long journey back to a friendly port. Our ROV found the M55 resting precariously on a sheer underwater ledge, its hull intact but clearly disabled. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the key to finding the Chimera D7 and understanding Worth's true motive. The sub was pristine, preserved by its isolation, but accessing the interior was fraught with risk due to the unknown location of the volatile charge. We carefully approached the M55 using a specialized retrieval frame, working under the clock of the ocean's subtle temperature changes. The submersible single hatch was still securely dogged down. We use a non-contact acoustic imaging system to scan the interior. The first scan was terrifying. Commander Worth's skeletal remains were slumped in the pilot's seat, his hands still on the controls, a victim of oxygen failure or a sudden system shutdown. But the second scan was the breakthrough. Wedged into the tiny cargo bay behind the pilot, surrounded by insulated padding, was the unmistakable shape of the Chimera D7 charge. The charge was visibly larger and more complex than the smaller Seashlange charges found in the base armory. It was live, unstable, and perfectly preserved in the cold water of the M55. This confirmed Worth was attempting to deliver the charge, not just his personal logbook, to a rendezvous point. The question remained, why risk his life to save a weapon he knew was fatally flawed? A closer scan of Worth's skeletal remains revealed the answer. Tightly clutched in his hand, fused to the bones by corrosion, was a small, sealed copper tube, a final, personal message that Worth intended to deliver. Once recovered and safely opened under laboratory conditions, the message revealed a twist of historical proportions. Worth's note was addressed not to Donat's successors, but to a named British intelligence officer known to have negotiated secret defector agreements in late 1944. The note explained that Worth had secretly been collaborating with the British for months, providing them with technical data on the Chimera's instability. His final mission was not to smuggle the weapon out, but to smuggle it into a deep water location known only to the Allies, a kill box, to ensure its permanent destruction. The D7 charge was so volatile that Worth knew the Allies couldn't risk recovering it. By taking it on the M55 and sinking it in an Allied-designated deep trench, he was delivering the final act of sabotage against his own collapsing regime. The complete story of Base Goblin is therefore one of betrayal, technological terror, and ultimate sacrifice. The base was annihilated by its own flawed weapon. The unit was executed by its own command, Abteilung X, and the commander Worth sacrificed his life to ensure the most dangerous surviving component, the Chimera D7, will be permanently buried in the sea, away from both fanatic SS units and the emerging Soviet threat. The silence of the abyss, enforced by the scuttling order, protected not the Nazis' secrets, but were its final, desperate act of defection and sabotage. We successfully recovered the M55 and safely neutralized the Chimera D7 charge, closing the final, terrifying chapter of Base Goblin. We found the truth about Oberleutnant Riegel, the lost unit, and the commander who became a double agent, leaving behind a legacy buried under the toxic silence of a self-destructive war machine. The real secret of the Goblin base was that the final, most important mission was an act of peace. What do you think? Accident or a mission deliberately erased and left on the ocean floor?